So I've kind of been thinking about doing this for a while, and I don't actually really have any time to do it. But I thought I'd better do it anyway, which is I want to talk about something that comes up all the time. When we look at gender identity ideology, we always compare it with a religion because the ideology is based on a belief. It's an internal sense, a subjective feeling. There's no evidence for it. There's no empirical way to determine if someone's literally a trans or not. It's pure belief. And so there's always a comparison with religion because the idea is religion is pure belief. There's no real substance to it, you know. And people who are proud to be atheist, you know, say, look, we're materially based. We follow the evidence, we follow the science. There is no evidence at all for being a God. And I would say I was pretty much in that camp for my early part of my life. When I was 14, I started my own atheist club because my girlfriend at the time had gone to one of those new American holy roller type events. The Americans kind of invaded New Zealand to bring over all their different types of Christianity rolling around and, you know, praising the Lord and doing all the sing-song stuff that they do. And she came to school one day and put her hands on my head and started speaking gobbledygook, and it disturbed me somewhat. So I thought she started to belong to a cult, and I started looking at the Bible to see what it was about. And given what I'm like, I read the Bible and a lot of different versions, which were a waste of time, like Wycliffe and Tyndale, which is just really bad English. And bishops, which seem to be pretty much the same. And of course, King James, which I like the best because at least the guy had done a really good job. Kind of made it poetic, and all the rest of it sort of cleaned the rubbish up. So it was good. But the thing is, what I noticed that I didn't get a lot from people who are fairly religious is that a lot of the stuff that was in the Bible was actually really pragmatic. It's like it was written by normal people, indigenous people, where, you know, they ask you to look for facts. Where's the evidence? You know, if any man says he's a prophet, then go and ask that man to prophesy something, say give it a short period of time, like 2 weeks or whatever, and see if it happens or not. And if it doesn't happen, then he's a liar and a fool. You don't hear that much. Or when it came to my friend with her gift of tongues rubbish, there was a passage in the New Testament which basically said, if any man says he's has a gift of tongues and there's no interpreter thereof, then he's a liar and a fool. In other words, the gift of tongues was the ability to speak another language, speak another language when they didn't really have the knack of that language, or speak and so someone else could understand them in their language, given there were so many different cultures and stuff like that. So that's fairly pragmatic. You know, there's nothing about that that's pure belief, even though one of the problems I have with the churches is that it was always belief-based. And when I seriously thought about whether or not I would join a church or anything like that, I was concerned that I'd be asked to be a believer, because I don't want to be a believer. I felt that if something was true, then you could knock it, bash it, smash away at it. And if it stood, great. And if it didn't, then it was, you know, dismiss it and move on. And if I looked around the world, my reasoning was when I was 14 and 15, so I looked around the world, there seemed to be some kind of order and design to things. And if there was a creator, then that seemed to be suggested his nature was there was ordered and lawful, as it were, and it wasn't all woo-woo or anything like that. So I rejected, just believing people or believing things because I thought it was too dangerous. And given I was on my own, about 15 onwards, I started, about 15, I started bringing myself up, worked after school as a waitress and got some cheap accommodation from a very kind family, that kind of thing. So I was very careful because I didn't want to be subject to any kind of predatory type of people using religion as a way to have power or control over me. I was a very suspicious kid. So I say this because a while back I was watching Feminist Heretics, and it's one of my favorite little podcasts because it's kind of quirky, and they've got some interesting ideas, and there's a kind of like design theory behind some of the things that they share, so I find that really interesting. But Associate Professor Lawson Smith brought over this bloke, this Anglican, I can't remember what his name is, and he started rabbiting on about how the Bible was the literal word of God. And I was just like, no, it's not. It ain't. You can't have a literal word of God when every one of those different Bibles that I've read differed so much between each text, had different interpretations, had, and then you think about it, it was interpreted from Aramaic and Hebrew and Greek and Latin and English and all the changes that happened, and it was really even interesting, just going slightly off topic. I remember meeting this bloke who was translating the Bible for Africa, and he had to change one of the parables, like this one where Jesus was standing at the door and knocking. He couldn't say that because in that culture, that would suggest that he's actually a thief. So they had to change it entirely to make it truthful to the intent as opposed to literal words. So, it's all kind of interesting, but I was looking at, and I was watching the Feminist Heretics and thinking, well, you're going to challenge that? Because that's bloody ridiculous. They didn't at all. So I was a bit annoyed by that. Comments node. Because it seems to me often, as much as that we would interrogate something like gender identity ideology because it's false, why aren't we interrogating religion in the same way? I certainly did. I know there is a God. I know from so many different ways that there is a God. I've served on a mission, when I got kind of converted myself. And I've been in a situation when I went on the mission, I had no money to go on the mission, and I just prayed to God and said, if you want me there, well, you're going to have to find the money there, because I did everything I could. I took a couple of years off university so I could earn the money to go. It wasn't enough to get me there. I thought, I'm going to go anywhere, you sort it out. And I did. So when you spend 18 months and week in and week out, you've got money to pay for your board and rent and food, etc., just coming in every week. Oh, I thought you might need this. Oh, blah, 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 blah. And that happens week in, week out. Goes past being a bloody belief, particularly when you're in circumstances and you've got very little resources, and that the only way you can get help is, asking for the help from God. And often that situation is quite extreme. You do literally experience miracles. You get past a point that things are belief. One of the basics, I think, of any faith is the idea that you live or try something that's true, but you don't know it, but on acting on it, all the promises or predictions that truth says is going to happen, happens, and it becomes knowledge. And that's the natural tie of faith. Faith acted on becomes knowledge. So it might not be the type of science where you are, you've got a control group, because I doubt very much you can get God in the room and sort of poke at him and like that. But there is a way of finding out if something is true or not by acting out on the laws and principles, etc. And this is not just about, I found, was Christianity. There was a while back in the early days of the internet, I found a wonderful internet group, meditation group of people of different faiths and pagan beliefs and Native Americans and Buddhists, etc. And I noticed that we gravitated towards each other because even though we had different religions, as it were, the bones of everything that we believed in was pretty much the same. We all kind of believed in testing things, not trusting things, poking at things, seeing if something is true or not, so we can have something to hold on to, And so what we found is that the bones of our belief was the same, even if the skin was different, if it makes any kind of sense. I can give you experience after experience after experience that I go from belief past the point of belief where you say, I know there is a God, and I'm quite happy to have that challenged and discuss it on any point, left, right, or center. That's not something that people can do with gender identity ideology. So I know this is a bit out there, and obviously for most people who are atheists or whatever will automatically assume that if you're saying something like, I know there is a God, that you're in woo-woo land yourself. But you never bloody tried it yourself, have you? You've never tested it. Certainly as a missionary, when I was a missionary, and I wasn't a typical missionary. I didn't believe in knocking on doors. I ran instead street plays and got kids off a street and got to know them and gave them experiences to build their kind of trust or faith in each other and get to know them so I could link them up with people who could help them. I just don't believe you just give them to, social workers or anything like that, because you don't know who those people are. You want to make sure that they get to someone who's actually caring, who's practical, who's useful, who's not, just phoning it in as a job. You want to make sure that people get real help and real care. So I suppose I'm just making this comment that I think it's lazy of anyone who's religious if you just have a belief and you don't know by now, that you haven't investigated your faith and tested it and investigated it and trialed it and see if it works or not. Can I share anything else? I think I share one thing. Okay. In the early days, I was wondering, is there any way you could prove, if I could prove it at least to myself, if there was a God? And I happened to be reading through the scriptures because I'm like really trying to get to know it really well. And also I like arguing with bishops and priests and things like that and beating them. So, and they never read it as thoroughly as one would think that they should have. I came across the passage which was it was about tithing, which is prove me herewith, if I know it will pour down the blessings of heaven, blah, 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 so you cannot contain it. Now, I remember I was about, I think, 17 or something. So I was putting myself through uni. And my flatmate had gone, and the money that I was getting from waitressing was not going to cover both food and rent. And it was getting pretty bad. I decided I would start paying tithing, and I was going to do it no matter what. But no matter what meant for a whole week there, I just had one kind of saucer of jam with a skin on it. I'm starting to get a bit of mold on one side. And I just had porridge and water and a slab of butter. And that's what I was living on. And at the point, you just start vomiting it up. Your stomach can just take so much porridge, and that's it. So I was getting really annoyed because I was doing the right thing, and I got really mad. And so I had a prayer to God and said, you know what? I'm going to continue doing this, and I'm going to die. I'm running out of food. There's no one I can turn to. Okay. And when I die, I'm going to go up there and then saying, you made a promise. It didn't happen. You were wrong. You're now a liar. And that means you can't be God anymore because you can't have God as a liar, blah, blah, blah. So I was really angry and upset. And I said that piece. And then I went away and had a bit of a walk. And then I had a bit of a thought, thinking, oh, this is kind of rude. No one made me do this, So I came back and said, look, I apologize. It's a bit rude. Didn't mean to hurt your feelings. But I'm just hungry. I'm really hungry. I do a lot of good things for people. I drop off food and packages and stuff when I've had plenty. Why can't it be done to me, And I stopped and said, I'm sorry, blah, blah, blah. And then I had a feeling, go to the door, and I thought, well, it's Wednesday. I'll go and get the Wednesday newspaper. And I went to the door, and there on the veranda was a box of food. It was preserved fruit and cans of stuff. And there was also a bag of wood for the fire and all the rest of it. And I was so shocked, and I just dropped to my knees, really thinking the box was going to say Heavenly Express. I was just so relieved to see it said Watties instead, which is a New Zealand brand. And I got this incredible warm feeling that came over me, and it felt like someone's arm around the back of my shoulders. And this really brotherly, amused, warm voice said, all you had to do was ask. you know. So that wasn't the first time I've had that kind of experience when I've sort of pushed things, because it was either do the right thing and it meant rationally it was not a good move. But if you really trusted that he would come through, when you really got a confirmation that that was the thing you need to be doing, and it did, over and over and over again, when you're in sometimes these extreme circumstances and you follow through, it no longer becomes extreme because you know it's going to happen. You know it's going to work. You know, that's how the law works. That's how the rules go, you know. So whether it's religion or ideology, I still say that you need to examine it, test it, try to break it, be prepared to argue with it, that there shouldn't be any kind of, it's not tolerance, it's almost condescension, like you give to a fool. Oh, that poor person believes that, well, we'll just let them believe it, live in their fantasy world. No, have a go. Have a go. See if it's real or not. Go attack it. Challenge it. Test it. Certainly, I know that people who are disciples, who do believe what they believe and know what they know, have done that already. They've actually lived it and know what they know is true, and they've got their feet firmly on solid ground. It's as hard as rock, even harder than the table in front of me. So that's just something I wanted to share and say. Bye.